In the heart of an Alaskan winter, where snowstorms are as common as the northern lights, I'd grown accustomed to the ferocity of the elements. For 5 years, I'd lived alone in a modest cabin on the outskirts of a dense forest, far enough from the clamor of the city to savor silence, yet close enough to make my daily commute to the small hardware store I managed. The solitude suited me, a quiet refuge from the world's chaos. But one night in late December 2017, storm rolled in with a ferocity that felt almost personal, shaking the foundations of my peaceful existence. It was a Friday, and the forecast had warned of heavy snow. I closed the store early, urging my employees to head home before the roads became impassable. By the time I reached my cabin, the snow was falling in thick, relentless sheets, transforming my driveway into a treacherous, uneven blanket of white. I shoveled just enough to park my truck, my breath puffing in clouds under the dim glow of the porch light. Inside, I locked the door, cranked the heater, and settled into my old recliner, creaky, overstuffed relic that tilted too far back if you weren't careful. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows in their frames, but I found the sound oddly soothing. With a mug of steaming cocoa in hand, I sank into the evening, ready for a night of solitude with a documentary about glaciers flickering on the TV. Around midnight, a sharp knock jolted me from my daze. I froze, the remote hovering over the pause button. My cabin sat isolated, a good quarter mile from my nearest neighbor, and unannounced visitors at this hour were unheard of. Heart thudding, I crept to the front window and peeled back the curtain. The porch light cast a feeble glow through the swirling snow, illuminating nothing but a chaotic dance of flakes. Then I saw them boot prints, crisp and fresh, leading up to my door and back down the steps into the yard. The edges were sharp, untouched by the falling snow, as if someone had stood there mere moments ago. I hesitated, my hand grazing the deadbolt. Opening the door would invite a blast of snow and wind into my home, and something about those prints, deliberate, unhurried, set my nerves on edge. I listened, straining to hear over the storm's wail. Nothing, just the relentless wind. Locked the door again, double-checking the bolt, and returned to my recliner, trying to dismiss the unease creeping up my spine. Maybe a lost hiker, I told myself. Maybe someone seeking shelter. But the explanation felt hollow an hour later. Another knock shattered the quiet, this time from the side of the house near the kitchen window. My pulse surged as I grabbed the heavy flashlight from the counter, its weight reassuring in my hand. The kitchen window was frosted over, a solid sheet of ice obscuring the outside world. I flicked off the interior lights to cut the glare and aimed the flashlight's beam through the glass. Nothing. The snow beyond was pristine. No footprints, no signs of movement. But the knock had been unmistakable, 3 deliberate raps, sharp and intentional. I stood there, sweeping the beam across the yard, my breath shallow. The storm's roar seemed to mock my growing fear. Maybe a branch, I reasoned, or the house settling under the weight of the snow. But the doubt lingered, gnawing at me. I checked every window, securing locks I'd already checked, and returned to my seat, the flashlight resting on my lap. Sleep was out of the question now. I sat, alert, listening to the storm's symphony, waiting for another sound to confirm I wasn't imagining things. Around 2 a.m., a third knock came, this time from the back of the house, near the sliding glass door that opened onto the deck. My heart plummeted. I slipped out of bed, grabbing the flashlight, and crept down the hallway, my bare feet cold against the hardwood. The curtain was open, revealing a deck blanketed in untouched snow. No tracks, no shadows, just the faint outline of the forest beyond, shrouded in the storm's haze. But the knocks had been real, 3 heavy thumps, echoing like a challenge. The rest of the night was a nightmare of repetition. The knocks continued, relentless, every hour or so. shifting around the house front door, kitchen window, back door, even the small window above the sink. At one point, I swore I heard footsteps crunching through the snow. But each time I checked, the yard was empty, the snow undisturbed. The storm's ferocity made going outside impossible, even if I'd wanted to confront whatever was out there. The blizzard would have swallowed me whole. I spent the night on edge, every light in the house blazing, the flashlight gripped like a lifeline. By dawn, the storm had calmed, the wind reduced to a soft moan, and pale sunlight pierced to heavy. Clouds bundled in my thickest coat and boots. I stepped outside, the air biting at my exposed skin. The yard was a pristine canvas of snow, but as I circled the house, my stomach twisted. Boot prints, dozens of them looped around the cabin, weaving between windows and doors. They paused at every entrance, as if someone had stood there, testing each one. The tracks were fresh, their edges sharp, and they continued beyond the yard, disappearing into the dense forest. I followed them, my boots sinking into the snow, my breath catching in my throat. About 200 yards in, the prints merged with something else tire tracks, the faint outline of a snowmobile's treads cutting through the snow. A thin layer of fresh powder dusted the tracks, suggesting they'd been made just before dawn, when the storm was still raging. Whoever it was had planned this, using the storm as cover. Knowing the snow would erase their escape, I stood there, staring into the forest, the silence deafening. Should I follow further? The tracks were already fading, and I wasn't equipped for a trek through the wilderness. Back at the cabin, I called the police. 2 officers arrived, Dan, older man, weathered by years of Alaskan winters, and a younger one, still green but eager. I recounted the night, pointing out the boot prints and the snowmobile tracks. The younger officer suggested it might be kids playing a prank, but the older one shook his head. "Not in a storm like that," he said, his voice low. This was deliberate. They followed the tracks into the woods, but returned quickly. The snow had filled them in, too faint to pursue. Whoever it was knew what they were doing, the older officer said. Could have been looking for shelter, or maybe they just wanted to scare you. The word scare didn't capture the dread that had settled in my bones. After the officers left, I couldn't shake the image of those footprints circling my home, the snowmobile waiting like a predator in the shadows. By afternoon, I drove to the nearest town, 20 miles away, to a gun shop I'd passed countless times but never entered. The clerk, a grizzled man with a nonsense demeanor, sold me a 9mm handgun and a hunting rifle, along with a quick lesson on handling and storage. His parting words lingered. Don't go looking for trouble, but be ready if it finds you. That night changed me. The handgun now rests on my nightstand, the rifle by the front door. I still love the solitude of my cabin, the way the forest wraps it in quiet, but I'm no longer naive about its dangers. The storms, once a source of comfort, now feel like a veil, hiding whatever lurks beyond the trees. I don't know who was out there that night or what they wanted. Maybe it was a prank, maybe something darker. But every time the snow falls and the wind howls, I check the locks, glance at the rifle, and wonder if they'll return. If they do, I'll be ready not as a victim, but as someone who's claimed their place in the wild. Duluth. Minnesota winters are unforgiving, but for an ice fisherman like me, they're a call to adventure. The thrill of drilling through thick ice, setting up a shack, and waiting for a bite while the world freezes around you is unmatched. It's a ritual I inherited from my father, who'd sit with me on frozen lakes, his thermos of coffee steaming between us as we shared stories and silence. Even after his passing, ice fishing remained my way of keeping him close. So when a tough week at work left me craving escape, I ignored the blizzard warnings and headed to a remote lake, eager for solitude. The snow was falling hard by the time I reached the lake, visibility reduced to a mere 20 feet. The wind howled, cutting through my layers as I hauled my sled across the ice. The lot was empty, no surprise, given the weather, but the ice was thick, at least 10 inches, solid enough for a truck. I drilled my holes, set up my portable shack, and lit the propane heater, its soft hum warming the small space. Settling into my folding chair, I baited my line and let the storm's isolation wash over me. This was my sanctuary, no deadlines, no emails. Just the creak of the ice and the whisper of the wind. An hour in, a shadow caught my eye through the shack's frosted window. Squinting, I made out a figure in the distance. Eldest, a man standing, motionless, facing my direction. At first, I thought he was another fisherman, but the empty parking lot nagged at me. Who walks out here in a blizzard? His stillness, framed by the swirling snow, sent a prickle down my spine. I looked away, checking my line, but when I glanced back, he was gone. Swallowed by the storm, 20 minutes later, footsteps crunched. Outside the shack, my heart raced as I unzipped the door just enough to peek out. There he was, tall, bundled in a heavy coat and scarf, his face obscured. "You shouldn't be out here," he said, his voice deep and gravelly. "The ice isn't safe." I frowned, gesturing to my drilled holes. "It's solid, 10 inches at least." He shook his head. "Not today." His tone carried a weight that chilled me more than the wind. Before I could respond, he turned and vanished into the snow. His words lingered, unsettling me. The ice was fine, wasn't it? Then it came a deafening crack, like the lake itself was splitting apart. The ice groaned, and I scrambled to gather my gear, my heart pounding as I stumbled out of the shack. The cracks spread like veins, the ground shifting beneath me. I ran, my boots slipping, as the ice gave way with a roar. My shack tilted, one side plunging into the freezing water. I didn't stop until I reached solid ground, my chest heaving, my legs trembling. I turned back, the lake a chaotic mess of broken ice and swirling snow. My shack was gone, swallowed by the depths. But what froze my blood was the spot where the man had stood. No footprints, no tracks, no sign he'd ever been there. I stood, staring, as the storm's howl faded to a whisper. Who was he? How did he know? I drove home, shaken, and asked around town. No one else had been at the lake that day. A friend mentioned old tales of spirits, warning of danger, but I'm not sure I believe them. All I know is I haven't returned to that lake. The ice may hold, but some things are better left undisturbed. After weeks of grinding through construction sites, surrounded by the clamor of drills and shouted orders, I crave silence. A remote cabin on Mount Hood, Oregon, promised just that weekend of solitude, snow, and a crackling fire. The forecast predicted a storm, but that only added to the appeal. I arrived as the first flakes fell, trudging through unplowed snow to reach the cabin. The key was in a lockbox, and the interior was as charming as the photo's wood-paneled walls. A stone fireplace, a cozy living room. But it was cold, the heater barely humming. I dropped my bags, lit a fire, and noticed the first oddity. Dirty dishes in the sink mugs, a plate, a greasy pan. I chalked it up to a rushed cleaning crew, washed them, and moved on. In the bedroom. The bed was unmade, the sheets rumpled, the pillow indented. I pressed my hand to the mattress, it was warm. My pulse quickened. Residual heat from the heater, I told myself, but the explanation felt thin. Shaking it off, I unpacked, cooked dinner, and settled by the fire with a book and a glass of whiskey. The storm raged outside, blanketing the world in white, muffling all sound. It was perfect till midnight. A faint creak broke the silence, like a floorboard bending under weight. I froze, straining to hear. Nothing, just the wind. I muttered, grabbing my flashlight. I checked the cabin doors locked, windows secure, snow outside undisturbed. I crawled into bed, the flashlight close. But sleep was fitful. By morning, the storm had passed. I stepped onto the porch with coffee, savoring the crisp air. Then I saw them footprints, fresh and sharp, leading from the back door into the woods. My stomach churned. The noises last night weren't the cabin settling. Someone had been inside, waiting, slipping out while I slept. I called the rental company, their apologies laced with panic. They hadn't known someone was squatting in the cabin. They offered a refund, urging me to leave, but I refused. I spent the day fortifying the cabin, testing the heavy manual locks, sturdy, unpickable. That night, I sat by the fire, coffee in hand, every noise a branch snapping, a window rattling setting my nerves alight. The locks held, the cabin silent. By morning, I packed and left, the footprints path still vivid in my mind. Now, when I rent a cabin, I check every corner, every shadow. Solitude is a gift, but it comes with a price. You're never as alone as you think. Chasing the perfect photograph is a compulsion. In Taos, New Mexico, the Sangre de Cristo Mountains promised a stunning shot of a snowstorm rolling in. I ignored the forecast's warnings, driving onto a winding back road as snow thickened. The road narrowed, flanked by a steep drop-off and towering evergreens. My tires hit ice, and my car slid, snow swallowing the wheels. I was stuck. Shoveling was futile. My phone had no signal, but I had gas, blankets, and snacks. I'd wait. It outtowns an hour later, headlights pierced the storm. A pickup truck stopped, and a man in a heavy jacket stepped out. "You all right?" he called. I cracked my window, just stuck. "I'll wait it out." He offered a ride to town, but his tone slow, probing, felt off. I declined, gripping the steering wheel. He didn't leave. Instead, he circled my car, his hand trailing along the hood, deliberate, unsettling. I locked the doors, my heart racing. He leaned close to my window. "Sure you don't want to ride?" I stared ahead, silent. He chuckled, low and cold, and returned to his truck. But he didn't leave. His truck idled behind me, engine revving sporadically. I turned off my headlights, hoping he'd lose interest, but he stayed, a shadow in the storm. Hours passed, my nerves frayed. I drifted off briefly, waking to find his headlights gone. Dawn revealed a calmer storm. I freed my car and drove to town, shaken. At a diner, the waitress's face paled as I told her. "You're lucky," she said. "There's a guy in a truck like that, preying on stranded drivers. No one knows what he wants, but it's not good." I traded my car for a 4x4 with mud tires, a shovel, and a satellite phone. I still chase storms for the perfect shot, but I'm cautious now. The mountains are beautiful, but they hide more than snow.